Again, it's very exciting to be here, and it gives me great pleasure to invite our next guest, Catherine Ulrich, to the stage. Catherine, whose name is quite well known, I'm going to read you a little bio, though I'm sure most of us are familiar with her. She's a managing director of Firstmark Capital, where she invests in a broad range of consumer and enterprise startups. Before joining Firstmark, get this, she was Chief Product Officer at Shutterstock, where she was responsible for product strategy and execution, including the company's move into machine learning. Prior to that, Catherine was CPO at WeightWatchers. Here's Catherine. Let's give her a hand. Catherine, how are you liking the city?
Love it.
Yeah?
I love Toronto. Love Canada.
Oh, you do good. It's the right thing to say. So we've got a ton of questions for you. I mean, this audience is also keen to get into a Q&A later. Yeah. But let me start off with this. I mean, before joining Firstmark Capital, as I've mentioned, you were CPO at Shutterstock and at WeightWatchers. Tell us about your roles there and how they shape what you do right now at Firstmark.
Yeah, so I mean, a little bit of context first. I was at WeightWatchers for almost 9 years. So WeightWatchers was really a big part of my career, and it was actually my first move into product. I joined WeightWatchers at a time when there was the brand WeightWatchers that's been around for 50 years, and they were launching WeightWatchers.com, which was the digital startup within the brand. It was treated in the early days very much like a startup, literally separate building, separate team, leave it independent so it doesn't get, in some ways, bogged down by the legacy business. And I joined, just for context, as an analyst. I came in as a strategy analyst, so you could almost think of it as like the lowest role within the company. Did a bunch of internal strategy projects, and took a step from there to FP&A, so that was my entry point. And then from there was actually asked to move into product. So I felt like I moved into product at a time in New York when product was not a thing. In fact, because when I was asked to take on this role, my first reaction was like, well, great, I think I can do it, but what does it take to be a product leader? And I went to go reach out to the top digital product leaders in New York, and honestly, there were not many. This is back in 2007. There just were not a ton of New York-based seasoned product leaders. And luckily on LinkedIn, I cold called some people on the West Coast who were at big companies like Netflix, and a couple of people, bless their hearts, answered me, and have been mentors of mine ever since, and kind of in some ways brought me up that way. But that was my story of how I got into product, which I think is important perspective. What I would say is that I was very lucky that WeightWatchers teach you some really important fundamental skills of product. Beyond just learning how to do the product craft, WeightWatchers is entirely based on behavioral economics and behavior change. It is a behavior change model, period. The way that we taught people to lose weight was through behavior change techniques. And so if you learn those techniques, they actually apply to any product in any market out there. So I was very lucky that my first product role was actually a role in a company that gave me this set of skills that was incredibly valuable for wherever I went. Then I went to Shutterstock and was the CPO there. I think Shutterstock loved that role because it was a two-sided marketplace. So as WeightWatchers, I had retail, I had a digital subscription business, I had licensing and all these different channels, online coaching. I went to Shutterstock and I had this two-sided fascinating marketplace at a time where two-sided marketplaces, I'd say, were going to the next version, whereas it wasn't just good enough to have two sides, a buyer and a seller. It was all about how a product could create really powerful connectivity between those two sides and these viral loops. And so, again, that was a great just general product skill I had from being at an organization that was Shutterstock. And then I made the leap, and it for me really was a leap, the leap into venture. I was not someone who was planning on moving from product to venture, if I'm really honest with, and this I can think we share it with this group, but in fact I said no in the beginning because I love building product, I love building product teams. It was uniquely Firstmark and my other partners, and we can talk about this more, and I thought the value that a product background would bring to investing and to being a board member to our companies, which is what we do.
That's great, because I think that's my next question. It's such an obvious one. I mean, what do you think, having been on both sides there, right? Here you were as a CPO, and then now here you are on the VC side. What do you think makes for a great product?
So my general rule of thumb of that is two things, actually: alignment and simplicity. So align it and make it simple. that's the phrase that I go back to all the time. So what I mean by alignment, I find that great products have a really intuitive way of aligning business incentives with customer incentives. And if you look, kind of the 1.0 wave of product was just build a product, right? It used to be the case that a company would invest in a tech team, and because technology costs were so high, that was the barrier to entry for businesses. If I could build something, I was actually already a step ahead because most people could not afford to build something. Now, technology costs have come down, where I actually think this craft of ours, product UX design, all of it together, is even more important because the cost to start something is so low. It's the quality with which you build something. And what that means is that the best products align these incentives. So it used to be the case I could build a product, I could kind of create this nice business model for myself, whether that be, it used to be, we talk about like recurring billing, obviously subscription businesses are great. But you're seeing greater alignment, really thinking about what does the consumer want to buy and how does my product match it. So that's the example of alignment. I mean, I can give a couple. A big name one would be something like Prime, and what Amazon did, like genius. Every customer wants their stuff shipped to them faster and free. So great to build that product and align that incentive. Or you look in the auto insurance space where now there's a number of startups that are billing you auto insurance based on how often you drive your car. Brilliant. Why should I pay monthly if I'm just driving it 1 day a week or something? So that's examples of what I mean alignment of incentives. And then simplify, I think this brings in the importance of UX and design because I think that's a critical component of product. That is, you're thinking about the simplest, most usable way to design something. And I think, again, that's where we're in an era where that's incredibly important because it's not just about cutting steps out in the process. It's going back to the drawing board and thinking about the best way to build something and design it and make it as simple for the users as possible. So I feel like that's what makes the best product.
So it's not even optimizing. It's actually looking at the whole process and almost re-engineering it.
Yeah, re-engineering it and having it be, and thinking of all the small details. I think it's, in some degree, it's like what Mike was saying about the steak and the sizzle. It's how you wrap the product. It's not enough just to have a steak. That might have been enough 5-10 years ago. Now you have to think about all the experiences around it and how does it look and feel.
Interesting. Now, we hear a lot about VCs looking for product-led companies. Can you tell us what that means to you and why it's important?
I think it goes back, so absolutely. I mean, I'm excited to hear this because I'm a product person. I'm like, yes, someone finally gets it. But the reason why is I think product puts customers first. And I think what VCs know is that when you put customers first, you win. If you know a customer segment, if you know that you're solving a meaningful problem, you will build a business. It's just undeniable. So it's how I actually evaluate a lot of the startups I'm looking for. The top thing I actually look for is proximity to the problem you're solving or how deeply you've understood it. Either you've lived in the space for years and you know it inside or out, or if you were coming in kind of new to the space, I know that you've gone really deep with that customer set. And by the way, I think you guys in this room can probably relate to this. You kind of know when someone is bullshitting about whether they've actually talked to customers and not. Because real people they've talked with, they're like, oh yeah, I met Sam, and they can actually name people, describe it, give their personal life situations, how it's all wrapped together. It is very transparent to people that have been in a lot of customer interviews, whether you're deep into consumer insights. And that is the key to a great investment. So when I think about product driven, it's because you're going to be customer driven. You're not going to get distracted by overbuilding on the tech side. You're not going to get distracted by spending a bunch of money on marketing before you get the product right, which is going to result in churn. So if you're product driven, I think you have the greatest chance of success. So I think that's why as an investor, it also makes sense.
So let me take that a little further. I'm curious. Can you give us an example of somewhere where you decided to invest or not to invest on the basis of the company's product and why?
So I'm going to give you a backstory, and then I can give you some examples in our portfolio. Just for context as an investor, I think of it as you have all these different variables that you're evaluating when you look at a company, right? You're looking at the team. You're looking at the product that they built to date. You're even looking at the money they've raised and how they've spent that to know how well they're going to spend your money. You're looking at the market that they're in. Is it big? So we look at all those variables. Any one of those, you're never getting, you hope to get perfect across all of them. The reality is you're debating the pros and cons of all those variables. So sometimes I will tell you, it is the case that I will maybe meet a team and maybe not be totally in love with the team or have some doubts about their ability to execute. But then I will see their product, and they've got a rocking product, and I'm really impressed by how much they've built with a limited amount of money that they've raised. And that will then, get rid of my concern about the team that I might have initially had. So I think, there's a lot of ways that product can trump a lot of other factors in a deal if you see a great product that the team has built, because it shows execution, which is the most important thing. In terms of examples, so. I'll give you one because we've done it recently. There's this company, Roman. This might get some chuckles because I'm going to talk about an erectile dysfunction company. But this company ships ED medications directly to consumers. It's done through a telemedicine model. But it's a great example where, okay, you're taking something that traditionally is a very embarrassing condition that you don't even want to go talk to your doctor. You're able to do it online, so that embarrassment factor has gone down. But by the way, we met this team and then we saw the product, literally the box that you get the medicine rolled out in your house. And I like to look at both products as digital, not just digital and physical products. And it was just gorgeous. It was like the product itself, the experience of opening the box, seeing how it was contained, a little pamphlet describing, what potential side effects, how you should think about it, your dosage, how you take it. This product is exactly the opposite of what everyone thinks ED is. I don't want to get my medicine. I'm going to the pharmacy. Oh God, I have to look the pharmacist in the eyes and tell them that I'm getting this pill. And it just was the polar opposite. That's a good example. We backed Roman. It's growing very rapidly. And I think they have the chance of taking medical conditions and getting rid of the stigma and helping people just get the treatment that they need.
Wonderful, great example. So let's go on to talk about sort of this idea of a unicorn product team. First of all, in your opinion, is that possible, a unicorn product team? And if so, what would it look like?
I think it's possible. I do. I feel like it was probably the thing I enjoyed building the most. I think we had an amazing team at a number of points in my career. I think Shutterstock was a great example. To me, so I always thought of it as the 3 Ps. So I'll describe those. The 3 Ps are people, process, and principles when you're talking about building a great team. So let me just start with it. So people, on the people side, to me it is diversity. I just think that you need a great diversity within your skill set. Beyond things like racial diversity and upbringing diversity, I actually mean diversity in product skills. So this is something I believe deeply. It's actually been a pet peeve of mine that for years people would come to me and say, okay, Catherine, I got to hire a product person, a PM or a CPO or whatever level. And I say, great, what type of product person do you need? And they'd be like, a product person. And if you were hiring like a CMO, we would have all this vernacular for a CMO. We'd say, okay, a CMO who's good at SEO or display marketing or brand marketing or affiliate channels, but there was all these adjectives that you could describe someone in marketing, even tech in terms of languages and front end and back end and so on. And in product, for a long time, I feel like it's just been lobbed into product, which I think has been something that's held us back. If you look at product people, there's so many different flavors of product people. It's just like marketing. There's growth-oriented product people, back-end service-oriented product people, people that know workflows, tool workflows. And those different skill sets mean a diversity of product people. And I believe the best product team has PMs that come from all those skill sets. No different than you wouldn't build a marketing team out of all affiliate marketers. You shouldn't build a product team out of all growth-oriented PMs. So that's one, is diversity of it. My other component in P that I am a real advocate of is the right dynamic between product and tech. This is one that I feel like it gets much debate. A lot of conversations of, should product roll up into a CTO? As a CPO, do you want tech to roll up into you? And it's one of these things where it would have been very easy for me in my career to actually say, yes, tech should roll up into me, because then I get to be the ultimate decision maker. I can make things run faster. And I've actually had those conversations in my career, and my answer was always no, because I believe that, similar to a government model, there's a balance of power between two functions. And I do actually believe that product and tech, ideally, are two functions that should work extremely well together. There should not be animosity between the two. It needs to be a true partnership, but when you set up that partnership, you have the right debates. And so that's one dynamic of having a team with that right partnership and debate that I put in. So that's the people side. The process side, and we can talk about this more, but the quick answer is autonomous, self-driven teams as a leader, giving people autonomy under a set of OKRs to run after it. I think I learned in my career that there were many times, because I've seen so many A/B tests and things been tested, where I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not going to work. I'm pretty sure that test is going to fail. And I learned, actually, a very hard learning was for me not to say that. Because I could say that, I could squash it, but actually the better thing was to say, you can do it, you can go for it. Like, here's the things, the risks, I would look at if you take that test, but go for it, because it's better for me to have that person maintain autonomy, run the test and learn, and then move on, because then now they've learned the lesson, and not because I told them so, because they've seen it. And that actually usually gets more scalability out of your team. And then the last one, which I'll quickly, is principles. This is more about leadership principles. I'm a big fan, if you want to read a book about the 5 dysfunctions of a team by Patrick Lencioni. I literally, when I was leading product teams, would read that every year, which if you read the book, you're going to think is funny because it's a 100-page fable. It's a story. It's a very short story. But I got something new out of it every time I read it. And what he lays out is, how do you build a great team? The most important one, the foundation of the principles, is trust. Most teams don't have it. So trust means you really trust one another. You are able to admit when you don't know something. You're able to question when someone says something. If you don't have the trust, everything else falls apart, right? If you don't have the trust, you're not bringing up the topics you're worried are going to impact dates. You're not bringing up, hey, that actually makes no sense that you pointed it with that many points, to even like, I just think this is a bad idea, or I think you misunderstood customers. So trust is the foundation. So I believe the best teams set those principles and they learn to really act as a team. And I would say this is actually something as an investor I look for now, and probably uniquely because I was in a company and building teams. I look for great teams. Like, I ask questions that people are like, what the hell? I've never had a VC ask me that question, because I will talk about how they hire and what are your principles for the team, and because I think that's actually an important quality of whether they're going to build great teams to great scale.
Because at some point it gets reflected in the product,
yes.
right?
The
the excellence in the product.
Yeah.
Yeah. In your bio, you say that you're a lover of behavior change.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you could relate that to the organizations you work with. What behavior changes do you think most often need to be made?
Interesting. My first answer is actually to get people to not be afraid. I think that's the biggest behavior change as a leader you are usually dealing with. So when you become, my view is this, when you become more senior, right, it's a lot more about influence and reading the room of a group of people. It actually matters to some degree, a lot less what I think, and it's more how I'm getting the team to respond and collectively think better. Fear is the #1 killer. So I feel like when you say what's the #1 behavior change I would have, like the thought that comes to mind, which is maybe another crazy story about me, was I had an experience where the site went down. I don't know. Has anyone had an experience where your site went down? Raise your hand. Come on, be honest. We're all proud of it. Okay. All right. So you have that moment, and on the product side, you're like, and also because you need the developers to dig into it. In some ways, many product people, we can't fix that, right? All we can do is help the developers dive into the code base and try to figure out what's gone wrong. So we feel powerless in that moment. And so when you talk about behavior change, all right, so imagine you walk into that war room and your whole team has got headsets on, you're maybe slacking, you're talking, everyone is like down and in it. And I walked into this room once when the site was down. It had been down for 3 hours during peak time. And so you can just, like, the stress is palpable. And by the way, this was relatively new. I had just taken a new role, so I was new into the role. And I stopped the room, all developers, and said, everyone take your headsets off and stand up, and we're going to dance to the soundtrack for 3 minutes. And all I'm asking you is 3 minutes. And you can just imagine, they're looking at me and like, you have got to be kidding me, lady. Like, you are a weird product person. This makes no sense. And I literally, and by the way, those are one of those moments where you just have to be strong in your conviction that this is going to work. It doesn't even matter if it is going to work. And so I blared the music so they couldn't even keep working. And for 3 minutes, everyone stood up and danced. And of course, like, it's like laughing. It's like you start it and you can fake laugh, and it's fake laughing, and eventually people actually start to really laugh, and then everyone's really laugh. Dancing is like that. So what was that? That was a behavior change. That was a state change of the entire room. Now, karma, whatever it was, thank God, like it was literally less than 10 minutes after that state change that we found the problem and fixed the site. But I do believe, I don't believe this is a fluke. I think it's fundamentally, it's how our brains work, right? So that's a state change because you get people out of this fear-based, shoot, I can't figure out how to get the site back up, to this, okay, I'm happy, like I'm moving, my body's been moving, we can solve this, and it's just a new perspective. And so when you talk about behavior change for a team, the behavior change ends up being a lot more that than it is any processes or procedures. That's a little bit like, yes, you got to get that in place, but that as a leader is probably the most important behavior change you run.
Interesting. So it's almost little steps.
Yep.
As opposed to, that's interesting. I'm sure there are aspiring CPOs in the audience. What advice do you have for them? I mean, you've had that, you've said that you started off as a business analyst, right? And you worked your way up.
So I guess two pieces of advice. One more about getting the job. How do you get to be a CPO? I think you get to be a CPO by not focusing on being a CPO, by focusing on solving problems. That's how you get to be a CPO. Actually, both my roles were first-time CPOs. I was the first chief product officer at WeightWatchers ever, and I was an internal recruit, promoted, but it was the first time anyone had ever been in that role. And I was the first CPO at Shutterstock for a different reason, but because we were scaling, and it was the first time we were building out C-suite hires. But it was the first time into both those roles. And I think if I had focused on, hey, I want to get to that title and that level, I would have never gotten it. But because I focused on how do you solve problems, add value to customers, very producty of me, that gets you to be a CPO. So that's kind of rule number one. Learn as much as you can and just focus on solving problems, and then advocate for the role when you're ready. Topic number two, which is maybe when I think about like advancing in your career, and this is how I would think about it and communicate it to my teams at the highest level. I always thought of it as like the more junior levels, just to say a product manager, an analyst, but the more junior levels, and I don't mean product manager is junior because it's actually not. You can be very senior in that role. But the more junior levels can identify a problem. So someone will come into my office and be like, this is really broken. I'm like, great, that's great. That is the most junior level. The next level is you actually come and say, this is really broken, and I think I know how to fix it. So you're proposing solutions above that. The next level is you've had some degree of experience or testing where the solutions you propose have they have a higher chance of working because you've gone through more tests. So this is why I just keep learning. You've tested and run more things, so I have believability that you're going to be a little more right the first time than before. Then there's a big leap, because that's just about proposing solutions. The next leap is about getting that change done with an organization. That was usually my VP level tier. I didn't care how good you were at building products. If you couldn't figure out how to execute across an organization, then you shouldn't be at the VP level. It's a different level of execution. And then the most senior level, so when you get to CPO, I feel like that level is ability to execute by influence. So it's not executing by telling people what to do. It's being able to understand your team, your VPs, your leaders, how to get them to make the best decisions and execute by influence, which interestingly enough, when you pull apart the curtains of like what is venture, that is what venture is, right? Even though I'm a board member, I don't have control of a company. So the only thing I have to trade on is my ability to build a great relationship with my founders, influence them in some way if I feel like the business needs to move in a direction, but I don't have the control. And that's
it's almost like a strangely transferable skill, right? Yeah. Even though you're bringing money to the table, which is
Yes. So I feel like that's critical.
Okay, I think we have a couple of minutes left before we go to Q&A, so we will have some time for questions. I'm curious to know this. Tell us about a product you wish you had thought of.
Okay, I'll give you two. My first one is Peloton. I think that's somewhat lame, but the reason why is because I was in health and wellness at WeightWatchers. I've seen every fitness trend, tried everything, love cycling, and had 2 kids, so could never get to the gym. And I'm like, why didn't I? This makes so much sense. And the community nature of it is actually very much like WeightWatchers in terms of doing classes with others. So that's my one where I'm like, darn it, I love that space. Why didn't I think of it? The one I'll maybe say is a weird answer to this question is, has anyone ever ordered a product on Amazon and then tried to return it and been told you can keep it? Raise your hand.
Yeah.
Okay, how awesome was that moment? The first time it happened. You're like, what? This company just let me keep, I actually ordered 2 books by accident instead of 1. I just got to keep this book. This is like, and you have this weird, because it's like, I've never had a business respond to me that way, ever in my life. And that moment, I'm like, well, that is like really fascinating, right? Because it's so many variables for how they got to that point by being customer-centric, right? They got to that point by doing things like Prime and having free shipping. And then because of the economics of free shipping, they got to a point where certain products of a certain price point, they just let you keep because it makes business sense to them. And that is just something, that is one of those brilliant win-wins. And I say that because like this is where like product is more than just the thing that you build. Product is the full end-to-end experience. And that's a great example because that is a product feature of Amazon. That is not just the checkout flow or the buy it in one click feature. That is a product feature that they innovated on, and it is brilliant and customer centric, and I love it. And I think, by the way, coming back to like what makes CPOs, to make CPOs, it's not just about building the thing you're building, it's about thinking about all the interactions the customer has with the product and inventing solutions like that you might think are more financial engineering solutions, but actually are really impactful product experiences.
So you actually think that's intentional in a sense?
Oh, that is totally intentional. That is totally intentional. This is like, and I think this is the stuff I love about product. I am happiest like looking at products when you have the toughest of prioritization decisions, which I know is the killer of all of our lives in some ways. But priorities between building something because your customers need it, trying to hit financial targets and how do you blend that, and then dealing with whatever it is, tech debt or how you're going to architect something or how long it's going to be. I mean, there's so many variables. The fun I have is if you can, sometimes like you should go through a process, and then I would take a step back and honestly get some time for myself. And you're just trying to think about outside the box. I guarantee to any problem you have, there is a solution. It's kind of if you get yourself in the right mental state, if you are not fearful of figuring it out or meeting your deadline, you will solve it in a brilliant way. I think Prime is kind of a great example. That product was a really great example, but you have to be in the right mindset to be able to come up with those.
I agree with Prime being brilliant. Like it's actually become something you're dependent on now.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I think we're going to take questions now.
Great.
So I believe there are 2 people with mics that are walking around. Oh, here we are. So can I just, if you can sort of look around, you'll see 2 people with the orange shirts. They've got mics, and Catherine is happy to take questions.
Yeah.
So I would say raise your hand, and they will find you.
Great talk. Thank you. As a product manager, oftentimes you need to convince a lot of people to do things. I mean, I probably have more than 20 stakeholders that I interact with every day, and I work at a very large company that it's a very large tech company, and goals are not aligned. You cannot sometimes make them do things that you want them to do because they have different incentives. Can you talk about an experience that you had where you took some sort of initiative to make sure the goals are aligned? Because this is just a very strategic change. You cannot just change it as a product manager at IBM, for instance.
Yep. So you have I'm going to answer in 2 ways, because that is a challenge, right, if the goals are not aligned. I feel like the first thing that I would always do is actually try to get the goals closer aligned. These are really tough conversations. Like, I don't know what the topic is. I'll maybe give a typical one might be, we actually, and I always hated having to advocate for this, but I remember situations where we actually had a piece of tech debt that was not going to deliver business value. It was not going to deliver revenue for the quarter. But I really believed that we had to address it now because I needed to be able to launch this other feature. And if I didn't get this cleaned up, I wouldn't be able to do it. And so if you're thinking about how do I build this business, how is it going to be great in the next year or something, 2 years, 3 years, I have to address this now, even though it sucks. So you have to try to get everyone on that same page, understand why that has to be done. And then what usually happens is that there's some negotiation, for example, of, okay, we will commit to that as the top priority, but we're going to let this other work be this much. And you usually have to put really tough guide rails, like only 10% of resources can be on this. And by the way, that means that any initiative that falls in that bucket has to meet these 5 factors. And if anyone proposes it to come in, then we're going to look at these 5 factors and decide whether it goes into that backlog. I know that isn't a full answer of anyone, but that's top. That's like number 1, try to get the incentives aligned, because otherwise this whole thing is a harder debate. So you got to force those really hard conversations and try to get people closer aligned. The other technique, though, which is I would say it's kind of like cheating, but not cheating, but it's just trying to convince people to get really excited about what you're building. And so that's easy to say, hard to do. My principle for that is, it's actually a framework I've always used with my teams, is when you think about a product, everyone starts with describing what job their product does for people. Then if you level up one level, it's usually, how is your product going to do that job? So like, let's say my product does something, the how is it does it faster or does it better for someone. And then there's the why. And most people actually don't get to the why. Most people don't get to the really fundamental why for something matters. The best way to like share this would be the story, if you guys watch the movie about Steve Jobs, and he finds that I think the computer's starting, and he's like, the start time is too long in the movie, and he freaks out about it. He's like, the start time cannot take 6 seconds. And the engineer's like, why not? It doesn't matter that it takes 6 seconds versus 3 seconds. What are you talking about? And Jobs all of a sudden takes the extra 3 seconds, multiplies it times the number of start times, times the number of days, times the number of years, and it's like, you just lost someone a year of their life. That's why. Okay, what do you think that engineer did? He fixed the 3 seconds. So a lot of product people don't, if you can get to that why, honestly, you can motivate people to do amazing things. I've seen my teams, the best PMs, who, a different approach would be to try to say, okay, engineers, you got to be in by 9 a.m. and I want you staying at the company, working really hard, heads down till 7 p.m. And then if you say instead, okay, here's the why for why we're building this product, or honestly, even fixing this bug. Let me show you a video of a customer who is really frustrated with it, trying to show them that. All of a sudden, that engineer just happened to do it overnight because he was motivated by the why, or she was motivated by the why. But I think that's a technique that sometimes if you can't align incentives, go for that.
So I will say, because we have said it's a Q&A, unfortunately, we are running out of time, but we can take one more question. So make it really good. Someone? There's someone out here. Thank you. I think we have a mic coming your way.
So you were talking about not being afraid of meeting deadlines and then being able to think outside of the box. How do you get your team to not be afraid of deadlines?
Work with your leadership. Have the right leaders. That was my biggest job as CPO, because I did have deadlines. My biggest job was trying to do the executive negotiations about when things really had to be done. I think that honestly the answer is that a deadline is scariest is when it's nearest. Most people screw up because they're not organized enough early on. I actually have no problem with deadlines and dates. I think that large organizations need them. You actually do. I think the problem is you have to have the right processes and procedures to front load it. Way front load it. Be good at estimating how long it takes you to do work. Get smarter about that over time as a PM. Build in buffer time for your team. So if you're telling me as a CPO a date, I'm always asking my team, how much buffer time did you put into that? I have a very trustful relationship with my team and the tech guys, where then they know that like if I'm committing to the CEO or a board member, I'm putting my own buffer on top of it. But they know that, and guess what? That comes down to trust. And then they know that if look, unseen things happen, that I'm going to go for bat for them and explain why this is what happens, and we're just going to make the best of the situation. But the only thing is like I don't accept on my team not doing the work up front. If you didn't do the work up front, then I honestly in some ways have no sympathy of you missing the date. Because our jobs are to plan out the project, figure it out, know that things are going to come up, and I do believe you can build in some of that into the plan. And then yes, problems happen, but I'm a big person of having a process in place. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Right.
Catherine will be here and I think once we get to some portion where we're networking, you can ask Catherine more detailed questions. Thank you so much. That was so insightful. Thank you.